Good afternoon, everybody. This is Steve Monday, Chief Forecaster with Rowan County Weather, and we are here with another edition of the Rowan County Weather Podcast. And today we are joined by William Palaszczuk, and Willie P, as he's known with a lot of folks around the Charlotte metro area. It's an honor to have Willie with us today. He is the radio voice of the Charlotte FC. Among many other things, Willie works for WFNZ Sports Radio in Charlotte. He's filling in this week, at least today he was, for Jeff Rickard. Not sure about the rest of the week, but he also covers the Charlotte Hornets and several things with Charlotte FC, or excuse me, with WFNZ. But his main passion certainly is Charlotte FC. Willie, it's an honor to have you with us today.
Vargas in the area, still with it on the right side, stepping over, sending it back for Lindsay. Lindsay sends it back into the area for Swiderski. One touch, he scores! Another one for Swiderski! And that one was more impressive than the first!
Honored to be with you, Steve. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So, Willie, you and I are both actually in our going on third season with Charlotte FC now. And we've seen a lot really in the first 2 years. But undoubtedly, the club is off to its best start in franchise history in year number 3 here with Coach Dean Smith. What's been your thoughts early on in this new season with the club and what they're accomplishing?
There's a lot of excitement right now, Steve. The Dean Smith era has definitely brought about a lot of optimism, a lot of newness. I've used the term before that it's almost like he's a breath of fresh air, which is not to demean the people who were here before, because I think you don't get where you are without remembering where you've been and doing so fondly. But I do feel like he brings a new bit of organization to a lot of things at Charlotte FC. And I just got done recording our podcast with Jessica Charman. And one of the things we talked about on there is the fact that he has revolutionized, and I also think, and to use Jess's word with it, he simplified a lot of things for Charlotte FC without the ball. Defensively, it's a completely new system. There's a mid-block formation that they go through without the ball, and they made things very, very difficult for teams to really get themselves forward with, because they're forcing everything to the wings and playing very well on the wings. And also, anytime you try to get something through the middle, you've got Ashley Westwood, Jabril Diani, and even some back defense from guys like Nikola Petkovic and Brek Diahare and even Arfield when he wasn't hurt to really kind of stop things. And it's really just changed the way you look at the way this team can play, because they're very great and successful on the counter press. They're very great as well in trying to create chances. While the execution of those chances is at least been a little bit slow to the foot a little bit, I do feel like as long as you're getting those chances, they'll begin to be converted in mass. And I think the addition of Liel Abada only just enhances that excitement for Charlotte FC. And I also think that it'll create a lot of competition for the rest of those positions throughout the team, because as we always know, when you got a guy like Liel Abada, it's just going to make people, want to be themselves on their game, whether it's Patrick Agyemang, Enzo Capetti, Kelvin Vargas, or anybody in that nature, because they want to make sure that not only is Abada somebody who likes playing there and playing around those guys, but they can continue to add the kind of quality like they have with Abada with other players potentially in the summer, as well as later on in this current window as well.
One of the carryovers from last season that's been very predominant so far in the early season. Obviously, the club's only had 2 home games. We had the stretch there right at the start of the season where the club was on the road. I know they were kind of glad to get that out of the way early, but really the carryover's been that there's been 12 games in a row now that the club's unbeaten right there in Bank of America Stadium. Yeah, clearly, a lot of that has to do not only with the play on the field, but the atmosphere itself. The supporters create a tremendous atmosphere there. And obviously, you guys hear it up in the booth. But what's been your thoughts with the club staying in this undefeated streak really for the last 12 home games now?
Well, it's impressive, Steve. It's longest, obviously, in the club's history. And the one thing that I will say is that this is a league, and again, I follow soccer all around the world, and home road is always something you want to look at. And there are certain leagues where it's easier to win on the road, and then there are some leagues where you know great quality teams win wherever they go. But for whatever reason, this particular league, whether it's the grueling nature of the travel, differences in the atmospheres, or just the fact that you just have these atmospheres that are very, very hard to feed off of if you're an opposing team. there's such a disparate nature in the way teams play at home versus the way they play on the road. That's not to say that you can't go into a road atmosphere that's difficult and pull out a result or even get all 3 points. But it's a very, very difficult thing in this league to be a very highly sought after road team. And Charlotte FC, this is not to denigrate their success at home, but they've really created what they like to call the fortress. And very, very few teams come in there and come out with a result. The last team that was able to do so was Nashville. And I think you and I can agree, Steve, did so with maybe a little bit of fortune on their side with the penalty spot goal that was awarded off of the, I guess you could call it Jacob Schaffelberg flop, if you will. So from that nature, when you think about that, that takes you back almost even further. That takes you to 19 consecutive contests with Charlotte FC, because you have to go back at least 7 more in that vein to get themselves their last loss before that. So it is something to behold. I think they fed off of it, but I also think, and I agree with Dean Smith when he says this as well, it can't be something that they try to lean on, because that's something that the opening year team really leaned on a lot, almost, I think, to their detriment. They didn't get their first road win until the 3rd of July against Houston. And that was an atmosphere at the time that, quite honestly, Houston had been kind of down in some years. They've had a nice renaissance over the last couple, but that's an environment that I know very, very well. And it doesn't usually play out that way. Usually that's a tough place to go play. And Charlotte FC handled themselves rather adeptly. So what I'll say in a long-winded way of getting around to it is, it's great to win at home, but as Dean Smith says, it's great to be good everywhere. Harder to do in this league, given the travel, given all the other things and factors that are involved. But it is great to see not only the fans be happy at Bank of America Stadium, but the Fortress being a tough place to play again.
Absolutely. Now, one of the things that a lot of the fans don't get to see, and I really obviously would not have known this myself if not for covering the club with you. Of course, you and Jessica call the games on the radio, and pre-COVID, I'm assuming the MLS kind of kept this going, but pre-COVID, obviously, when road games happened, some broadcasters did go on the road with the team, and they would call games on the road. With you and Jessica, you guys are calling them from, here in Charlotte, or, Jessica may even be calling them from in Georgia where she lives. But how difficult is that to call a game from a monitor rather than being able to see it clearly on the field in front of you?
Well, just to clarify, Jess is in front of me, so Jess does come up to Charlotte for those games. Uh, I'll say this: it probably was something that before I had done it, I was more nervous about than anything. Um, First match that Jess and I did as a demo was actually on a monitor. We did about 3 or 4 different games together on a monitor, not just to get used to each other, but to get used to doing that. I think she'd called a couple on a monitor before, but not necessarily exclusively. She was used to doing games inside stadiums as well as me. So it is something that you have to get used to. But the one thing that is cool is that we do get the noise fed back to us, so you get to kind of feel the atmosphere of there, and you're a lot of times at the mercy of what they show you on the pretty pictures. Sometimes there have been a couple of instances where we might see the down low feed a little bit too much, and you don't get as much of the picture of the pitch, but. We try the best we can to make you feel like we're there, and honestly, I haven't really been in a scenario where we've had any trouble with it. I'll even go back to the first ever goal that was scored. We were on the road at Atlanta, and the TV people who were there in the building didn't get the call right in terms of who scored the goal. And I was able to use the monitor well to see that. In fact, it was Adam Armour who snuck in behind or in front of Guzman Carujo to get Charlotte FC's first ever goal, and we were the only call that got that moment right. So quite frankly, Steve, sometimes there are moments and places where you'd almost rather be in a monitor. And I've heard that too from a couple of the other traveling MLS broadcasters. He said, you know what, don't necessarily feel bad about that, because there are certain games and venues and vantage points where you'd almost rather have the cozy monitor spot. For example, Toronto, they don't have a road press box. The guys who I know have traveled up there have to sit out in the stands at the top of the stadium, and sometimes you are prisoner to the elements there, especially with it being Toronto in an open air stadium. So I honestly feel like I'm happy to call them however they come, and quite frankly, it's a blessing to do, and we'll continue to do it the way that we're charged to do it.
You mentioned Lil Labata earlier tonight at 6 p.m. for folks that are watching this. You and I are going to be among several media members who are going to be down at the facility there to see Lil Labata's kind of welcome press conference to the club. I heard you mention earlier on FNZ, there's some coverage you guys are going to be doing there as well.
Mhm.
So if you wouldn't mind just passing that along for the folks that are watching and listening to be able to tune into that.
Sure, we'll be having that live on our air at 6 o'clock. We'll cover not only the live portion of the press conference, but also hoping to get a little one-on-one with Liel and get a little bit of a sense as to what he's like. And it's very similar to what the club did for Karol Świderski. I think the circumstances that brought Kamil Józwiak here, there really wasn't the availability to be able to have that kind of an event for him, and they didn't really do that for Enzo Capetti either. I don't know. I think part of the reason with him was because the unfortunate tragedy of Anton Walkes. It didn't really feel like a celebratory time in the club's history. So I think they've wanted to do these things for all the designated players because that is such a special type thing. And Liel's circumstances with how he came to Charlotte too are another just, I think, reason the team just wants to make sure that not only does he feel welcome, but that the supporters feel a certain kinship with him. I think he's an incredible acquisition to bring to this club from not only dynamism standpoint for the attack, but also from a personality standpoint with these players. I got a chance to see his first training session with Charlotte FC last weekend, and you saw the players took right to him. Ashley Westwood was right on his hip, explaining to him everything in terms of a tactician standpoint. He kind of stuck to Christian Fuchs like a magnet as well, just trying to make sure that, hey, he understood why things are being done the way they are. And you can't argue with the way that he opened. He played 30 minutes in the game on Saturday against FC Cincinnati, got a couple of shots. That first run that he took, that was an inward run that got him within about 25 yards from goal and got Charlotte FC a very nice sharp angle set piece. It's basically a window into all the different things that he can bring to the table. And I'm excited that he's going to get a chance to potentially make his full debut coming up this weekend, provided that he gets a little bit more fitness and training. But I think he's just somebody who could really raise the profile of Charlotte FC internationally, and of course also raise the level of play as it has continued to be raised over the course of the first part of this season under Dean Smith.
As we head into this weekend, the club's getting ready to travel up to the Northeast, take on New England up there. New England has obviously not had the kind of start they would like to have. They don't have the clear 3 points on the board yet, but they have gotten several draws. What are your thoughts on what the club needs to do to pull out the win up in New England this weekend?
Well, I think New England is kind of the victim of what some of these other teams have been able to do over the course of this early part of the season that have played not just in the MLS competition, but also in the CONCACAF Champions Cup. And they've kind of thrown all their eggs in the CONCACAF basket. They've got a game tonight against Club America in that competition. And then getting to the quarterfinals of that competition is no small feat. You're playing some very internationally known squads and really trying to get yourself in a scenario where you're playing up against teams that are in the middle of their season, whereas you have to basically be, touch tight and match fit up against teams that are in a different scenario. This is interesting because we juxtapose that with Leagues Cup a year ago. You were playing Liga MX teams at the end of their Mexican season, while Charlotte FC and all the other teams in the MLS were playing in the middle of their season. So it's almost kind of the reverse scenario that you're dealing with in terms of what you have with Leagues Cup. So that's the thing that they're kind of going up against. And when you play in CONCACAF, and we've noticed this with some other teams to start the season, your roster really takes a churn. You don't always have the same team out there. I think they've not had one consistent lineup over the course of the young portion of this season. They've had some injuries as well. So that's something you have to factor in. Some guys are at the place in different positions, maybe even out of position compared to where they usually fit and play. But they've made it work to get far enough into CONCACAF that they're in the quarterfinal round. You mentioned their MLS form is somewhat down, just one draw on the board. This is a very big opportunity for Charlotte FC. They gain a lot of advantages, does New England, with playing in their turf stadium. That's one thing that Charlotte FC has from an equalizing standpoint. They're very much used to that turf. They've not fared well up there. They've yet to win. Very, very few teams go up there and have dominant performances. But if you're looking for a time to play New England, it's sandwiched between two matches in CONCACAF. And when they're not necessarily on good MLS form, I think it'll be very imperative for Charlotte FC to at least feel like they have gotten a chance to execute their chances created, because that's the biggest question right now on the board. They're creating a ton of chances, ton of high danger chances, and they're all from high quality, but it's about finishing and executing those things. Look for Charlotte FC to have those chances continue to come, and hopefully they can make them pay when it comes to playing in New England this weekend.
Definitely. And, there's a few players who obviously have not gotten a chance to play yet this season due to injury. Brant Bronico certainly comes to mind. I know he's been getting, better and better as the weeks go. What do you think is going to work well for the club? Obviously, they've got some key players who have not been able to play consistently for injury or what have you. And now that they're starting to really get more of a feel for each other, especially with, some newer players coming in, what are your thoughts on the team getting stronger as the season goes on?
Well, there's still, like you said, a lot of injuries. People ask him all the time about Ben Bender. Ben is still handling his rehab from a torn meniscus that he suffered at the end of last year. And while I know there's a lot of impatience in Charlotte FC's mind, don't put out of your mind how he's feeling about wanting to get himself back there. I see him turning off to the side every time we're out there at AHPP, and it's difficult to see because I know when it comes to not only healing your body, you also have to heal the mind as well. And you're not used to a part of your body somewhat failing you. And that's something that he's had to kind of go through. And we hope the best for Benji. Same thing with Tiger Smalls, who we yet to see debut as well. He's been dealing with shin splints, and that's a very, very difficult injury to have to overcome. Brandon Cambridge, of course, with the broken lower leg. And that's one you look at and you say, you really wish the best for him to just not only get himself back to a fitness standpoint, because he's somebody who, given Charlotte FC's wing situation, could have definitely benefited from being on the pitch after being usurped by, the likes of Yuri Tavares and things of that nature. So I do feel like he's somebody who could be a very key player for Charlotte FC down the stretch if he gets himself back healthy. Bronico, you don't need me to tell you how much I love him. He's somebody who even Dean Smith said at the end of last week, to heck with Duracell, we've got Brant Bronico, or some paraphrasing of that particular phrase. He's going to be very, very important, I think, from Charlotte FC's perspective, because you're in a scenario right now with some guys getting some yellow card accumulation over the course of the first couple of games. Westwood in particular. I know Jabril's got a couple, and even Junior Urso had a couple as well. So this midfield's going to have to rotate through some pieces, I think, during portions of this season because of, not only those yellow card accumulation scenarios, but, whether Ashley Westwood, who just celebrated a birthday, can play 34 matches across a long season like this. So I do feel like it's a scenario that Charlotte FC is very well riched when it comes to the midfield. I know there's a lot of people asking also about Jalen Lindsay. I understand the situation that not having Yara Ornan involved on that left back scenario made them go to João Pedro, because honestly, I don't think Dean wanted to have to make two switches to make one. I felt like that having João Pedro on the left versus Nathan Murray on the left and Jalen Lindsay on the right was basically an equal type thing. And I think João not only acquitted himself well, but was a contributing factor in Charlotte FC's first goal that was hidden by Ashley Westwood as well. So I feel like that particular decision is something you look at and say that he can very much be fortified in. But I also feel like Jalen Lindsay deserves some time as well. And even Dean Smith said, he had a particular conversation with Jalen about his particular playing time and the fact that it hasn't come. And they've been trying to get him minutes to Crown Legacy. I know Legacy had a bye week this past weekend, so you lost an opportunity to keep Jalen fit in that scenario. But I think the time will come. You have to have a lengthy roster for the way that Dean Smith wants to execute his game plan. I think there's going to be plenty of opportunities for guys to get their chance as they go throughout this lengthy MLS season.
For folks who follow soccer regularly, like you and I do, I mean, you watch Premier League, you watch Concacaf, you watch La Liga, you watch a little bit of everything, like I do as well. Dean Smith obviously has a storied history, Aston Villa especially. How big of a get is that for Charlotte FC to bring in somebody like Dean Smith?
It was huge, Steve, and I spent some time in England over the course of the winter, and I brought up Dean Smith's name wherever I went, and everyone's like, "Oh, you got Dean Smith," and it brought a legitimacy to the club that I feel like they hadn't had before. And again, this is not to disparage or say anything bad about Miguel Angel Ramirez or Christian Latanzio, but Dean Smith's a recognizable name. And you look at the names that were brought in to MLS coaching gigs over the course of the offseason. I mean, there's no slouches there. I mean, Caleb Porter is obviously one that you look at New England. They brought in somebody with very great bona fides, especially in MLS. I think Troy Lesesne is one of the very, very big, huge young coaches in all of MLS. The fact that he didn't get rehired at New York Red Bulls seems a bit crazy to me. And I think DC got a really great steal with putting him in there and their positioning. I think the fact that Gio Savarese was out there for as long as he was, I think, was a bit of a travesty because I feel like he got a bit of a raw deal in Portland. But I do feel like Charlotte FC maybe he made the best hire of anybody during the offseason by bringing in somebody who has not only a great pedigree of working with young teams, he's worked at every level of salary spend. He's worked with teams that are lower budget. He worked at Walsall, his old team, for crying out loud. But he also worked at Brentford. He also worked at Aston Villa, and he also has worked at Norwich and Leicester. Teams that have high aspirations. And I think he's been able to make it work as not only a great man manager, but also a great developer. And I think those characteristics are what are going to make him a successful MLS manager. Couple that with the fact that he had the motivation of having his kid over here playing in Greenville to say, you know what, I want to check out America. I want to have this new task on my plate. And I think he's very invigorated. I've talked to people who knew him while he was in Europe and now have had a chance to speak with him since he's been over here. And they not only see the best parts of the man that they knew, but they also see an invigorated nature of the man that they knew. And they believe that he's going to have utmost success here, not just because of the system that he implores, the players that he will get, but also what he will do for those who are currently here and how they will thrive under his tutelage.
So, Willie P, before we wrap up, I always like to ask my guests certain questions that kind of are a little off topic to the conversation we have.
Mm-hmm.
I know you're a big food guy, so
sure.
This would be one of my questions for you. If you were on a deserted island and you only got one option for one meal, what would that meal be?
It would be a New York pizza.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Pizza is my favorite food. That and or steak. Maybe I'd opt for the steak on the deserted island just so I could have some strength. But if you're asking me to have to pick one, it would have to be a large New York pizza. That's what I'd pick.
What would you say is the most overrated food out there?
Most overrated food out there. I don't like turkey or ham. Either ham or turkey. I understand people like ham. We had ham on our Easter table earlier. I took a couple of pieces to be sociable. I'm not the biggest ham fan, and I only like turkey once a year, and that's on Thanksgiving. Otherwise, you could take it or leave it with me. So both those foods.
Yeah, my wife and I are the same way. Sunday we did not have ham. We actually went very non-traditional and just made a lasagna because we were
That's
like,
awesome. We do lasagna for Christmas in our family.
Yeah.
We love lasagna.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, so I know you've been following this story for the last couple of days. I've seen it on X where you've been retweeting it and stuff. So the bow sauce, have not gotten a chance to go by and see. Did the bow sauce actually come back?
It is back. I actually had it today. I had an epiphany because people were asking me what it tastes like. And it's very similar to like the blue and onion sauce over at Outback. It's got a little horseradish in it. It's not quite like the Arby's horsey sauce. It's got a little bit more of a tang and almost kind of a tomatoey, vinegary part to it. But I saw it was back and got two sauces with my Supremes and fries, and I was very, very excited to see that it was back. And I feel whole again, I guess you could say.
So obviously coming up tonight, 6:00, you're going to be back on air with the Leo Labata deal out at the facility there for Charlotte FC. I'll be there. Won't be on air with you, but at least I'll be there, covering it with you as well. Are you back in for Rickard anymore this week?
I'll back the rest of the week, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday as well. So Jeff took about a week of vacation, and he said, you want to host all week, and I was like, you know what, I'm somebody who's always got a hankering for airtime, so I said yes, and we'll kick it off again tomorrow morning at 10:00.
And then this weekend, obviously, Charlotte FC taking on New England. What time are you guys hitting the air for that?
We'll be on the air at 7:00. Kick time just after 7:39, and hopefully we're talking about 3 points because I honestly think this is one that's very, very gettable for Charlotte FC.
It's definitely, I don't want to overlook New England at all, but this is definitely some early
No.
season low hanging fruit that they could certainly get considering the circumstances for sure. So, all right. Well, Willie P., we certainly appreciate your time with us here on the Rowan County Weather Podcast. Again, you can check out Willie P. on WFNZ the rest of this week from 10 to 12. He's going to be filling in for Jeff Rickard. He'll be on again tonight for the Leo Labata welcoming press conference. And then, of course, Saturday with the Charlotte FC Radio Network for Charlotte FC versus New England. So we'll have all that for you. As always, thank you for joining us, Willie.
My pleasure, Steve. Anytime.